The city pulsed with relentless energy, its neon veins throbbing under a starless sky. Ethan Hawthorne, once the unchallenged king of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, had walked away from it all. No more private jets slicing through clouds. No more penthouses where champagne flowed like water and laughter echoed hollow. He had sold his yachts, dissolved his conglomerates, and retreated to a modest brownstone on the edge of the metropolis, a place where the walls didn't whisper power but quiet longing. At 45, with salt and pepper hair framing a face etched by years of calculated risks, Ethan sought something money couldn't buy: peace. And in the depths of that search, one name surfaced like a forgotten melody: Isabella Vance, his childhood love, the girl who had once made his world feel infinite. It started with a faded photograph unearthed from a dusty box in his attic. 2 kids, no more than 12, grinning under a canopy of oak leaves in the rural outskirts where they grew up. Ethan, skinny and awkward, with dirt-streaked cheeks. Isabella, vibrant and daring, her eyes sparkling with mischief. They had shared secrets in tree forts, raced through meadows until breath failed them, and promised forever in whispers that felt eternal. But life had pulled them apart. His family's moved to the city for opportunity. Her staying behind in the small town that time forgot. Years turned to decades, and Ethan built an empire on ambition, burying the ache of what might have been. Now, with his luxury life in ruins by his own choice, that ache demanded resolution. He traced her through old contacts, a private investigator's discreet report landing on his desk like fate's invitation. Isabella ran a quaint bookstore in the city's arts district, a haven of worn spines and herbal tea scents. No husband, no children mentioned, just a life of quiet independence. Ethan's heart raced as he stepped into the rain-dampened street, umbrella forgotten, his tailored coat clinging to broad shoulders. The bookstore's bell tinkled softly as he entered, the air thick with the musty embrace of old pages and fresh ink. Shelves towered like ancient guardians, and there she was, behind the counter, arranging a display of poetry volumes. Isabella, now 44, with raven hair tied in a loose ponytail, lines of laughter framing her emerald eyes, and a grace that spoke of battles fought in silence. She looked up, and time fractured. Recognition dawned slow, like dawn creeping over hills. Ethan, her voice, a soft lilt unchanged by years, carried a prize laced with something sharper, calculation perhaps, or caution. She set down a book, her fingers lingering on the cover, as if anchoring herself. Isabella. He breathed her name like a prayer, stepping closer, the floorboards creaking under his weight. Rain pattered against the window, a rhythmic underscore to the moment. Up close, she was even more striking, curves softened by time, a necklace of simple silver dangling against a collarbone, exuding an effortless charm that made his chest tighten. What brings the ghosts of summers past to my little corner? She tilted her head, a smile playing on her lips, warm but guarded. Her eyes scanned him, the expensive watch peeking from his sleeve, the subtle aura of wealth he couldn't fully shed. "I've left it all behind," he said, voice rough with emotion he hadn't rehearsed. "The boardrooms, the deals. It was empty. I needed to find what mattered. And you always mattered." He reached into his pocket, pulling out the photograph, its edges worn from his repeated touches. "Remember this?" She took it, her fingers brushing his, sending a jolt through him. Her expression softened, but her mind whirred. Isabella had honed her skills over years of survival, charming investors for business ventures that vanished like smoke, weaving tales that extracted just enough to keep her afloat. Ethan, the boy who had once shared her dreams, now stood as a mark too perfect to ignore. Yet, as she studied the photo, a flicker of genuine nostalgia stirred, unbidden and unwelcome. "We were kids," she murmured, handing it back, her touch lingering. "Innocent. The world hadn't chewed us up yet." She gestured to a cozy nook by the window, 2 armchairs flanking a small table. "Sit. Tea? Or something stronger?" "Tea," he replied, sinking into the chair, his large frame making it creak. As she prepared it, He watched her movements, fluid, precise, like a dancer in control. The shop was empty save for them, the rain intensifying, sealing them in this bubble of rediscovery. Over steaming mugs, words flowed. Ethan spoke of his rise, the ruthless negotiations, the isolation atop his empire. I thought success would fill the void, he confessed, his voice dropping. But it widened it. I woke one day realizing I traded my soul for gold-plated chains. His eyes met hers, vulnerable, searching. You were the last real thing I remember. Isabella leaned forward, her scent lavender and old books, enveloping him. She shared snippets, leaving the small town after her parents' death, scraping by in the city, building the bookstore as a sanctuary. Life teaches you to adapt, she said, her tone light but eyes shadowed. Sometimes you bend rules to survive. Internally, she mapped him, his longing a weakness, his wealth a prize. But his sincerity gnawed at her, echoing the boy who had once defended her from bullies. Laughter broke through as they reminisced. Remember the time we stole apples from old Mr. Hargrove's orchard? Ethan chuckled, the sound deep and genuine. And you tripped over the fence, face planting in mud. She threw her head back, her laugh melodic, drawing him in deeper. For a moment, the con faded. She felt the pull of authentic connection, a rarity in her world. As the rain eased, Ethan stood reluctantly. I don't want this to end here, he said, his hand grazing her arm. Dinner? Tomorrow? She hesitated, then nodded, her smile dazzling. I'd like that. As he left, the bell tinkling behind him, Isabella watched from the window, her mind a storm. He was vulnerable, ripe for the taking, a fabricated investment opportunity, perhaps laced with nostalgia. Yet, her heart whispered warnings. This mark felt different, dangerously real. Ethan walked into the fading light, a spark igniting in his chest. Peace seemed within reach, embodied in Isabella. But as he glanced back, seeing her silhouette, a fleeting doubt crossed his mind. Her smile, so perfect, almost too perfect. Back in her shop, Isabella locked the door, leaning against it. Foolish girl, she muttered, but her fingers trembled. The game was on, but for the first time, she wondered if she was the one being played, by her own resurfacing emotions. The city hummed around them, oblivious to the fuse lit in that quiet bookstore. Ethan, seeking redemption, Isabella, plotting gain. Their paths converged, promising collision of hearts, truths, and the fragile line between deception and love. What echoes from your childhood still call to you today, urging you to seek peace in unexpected places? The morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of Isabella's small apartment above the bookstore, casting fractured light across a cluttered desk strewn with receipts, scribbled notes, and a half-finished coffee gone cold. She sat cross-legged on a faded velvet chair, her fingers tracing the edge of a worn journal, its pages filled with plans or cons, each a meticulous dance of charm and deceit. Isabella Vance had crafted a life of calculated independence, her emerald eyes sharp with the cunning of survival. Her raven hair, now streaked with faint silver, fell loosely over her shoulders as she studied a photo of Ethan she'd found online, a billionaire in a tailored suit, smiling for cameras that never saw his loneliness. Her heart flickered with memory of the boy who'd shared her secrets, but she pushed it down. He was a mark now, a means to secure her future. Yet, as she planned her next move, an investment in a fictional literary festival, her fingers hesitated, a whisper of guilt threading through her resolve. Across the city, Ethan Hawthorne woke in his modest brownstone, a far cry from the penthouses he'd abandoned. The walls, painted a soft gray, held no trace of his former opulence, save for a single-frame sketch of the countryside he'd grown up in, a reminder of simpler days with Isabella. At 45, his broad shoulders carried the weight of years spent chasing ambition, his salt and pepper hair framing a face both commanding and weary. He stood at the kitchen counter, brewing coffee, his mind replaying yesterday's encounter. Isabella's laugh, Her teasing smile had unearthed a longing he thought he'd buried. But there was something else, a guarded edge to her warmth, a flicker in her eyes that hinted at secrets. He wanted to believe she was the same girl who'd raced him through meadows, but doubt gnawed at him. Was she truly the peace he sought, or a mirage born of nostalgia? Isabella's world was one of controlled chaos. Downstairs, her bookstore bustled with morning regulars, artists, students, and dreamers drawn to its eclectic charm. She moved among them, her smile a polished weapon, deflecting questions about her past with witty deflections. "Oh, I'm just a bookworm who got lucky with this place," she'd say, her voice light, but her eyes scanning for opportunity. Her life had been shaped by loss. Parents gone in a car accident at 16, leaving her to navigate foster homes and a city that rewarded cunning over trust. She'd learned to read people like novels, their desires and weaknesses laid bare. Ethan's arrival was a jackpot, but his sincerity threatened her armor. As she arranged a stack of novels, her fingers brushed a copy of Jane Eyre, a childhood favorite she'd read with Ethan under starlit skies. The memory stung, reminding her of a girl who believed in love before survival demanded otherwise. Ethan's morning was quieter, introspective. He sat at a small wooden table, the photograph from yesterday in hand, its edges worn from years of quiet reverence. His life had been a climb, business school, boardrooms, billions, but each victory widened the void inside. His father's cold expectations had driven him to excel, but left no room for warmth. Friends were few, relationships fleeting, overshadowed by the empire he'd built and then dismantled. Leaving it all behind was his rebellion, a search for meaning rooted in the only time he'd felt truly alive, with Isabella. He dressed simply, a navy sweater and jeans, shedding the billionaire's polish, and headed to a nearby park where he'd agreed to meet her for a walk. His heart thudded with hope, tempered by a nagging suspicion. Her charm was magnetic, but was it genuine? Isabella arrived at the park first, her scarf fluttering in the crisp breeze. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a flowing skirt, a soft sweater, exuding warmth and approachability. The park was alive with joggers and dog walkers, a perfect stage for her performance. She'd planned to deepen Ethan's trust a day, sharing just enough vulnerability to keep him hooked. But as she waited, leaning against an oak tree, her mind wandered to their childhood. Ethan had been her protector, her confidant, the boy who'd slipped her extra apples when her foster family skimped on meals. Could she really deceive him? She shook off the thought, straightening as she saw him approach, his tall frame cutting through the morning mist. "Morning," Ethan said, his voice warm but cautious, hands tucked into his pockets. His eyes searched hers, seeking the girl he remembered. "Hey, you," Isabella replied, her smile bright, practiced, ready to relive some old adventures. She gestured toward a path lined with golden leaves, her tone playful to mask the calculations beneath. They walked side by side, the crunch of leaves underfoot a nostalgic echo of their youth. Ethan spoke first, his voice low, deliberate. "I keep thinking about yesterday. The bookstore, the rain, it felt like stepping back in time. But you're different. Stronger, maybe harder to read." Isabella laughed softly, deflecting. "Life does that, teaches you to guard what matters." She paused, letting a hint of truth slip through. "After my parents died, I had to learn fast. People aren't always kind, Ethan." Her voice softened, eyes meeting his briefly, a calculated vulnerability that felt dangerously real. He nodded, his expression softening. "I get it. My father, he measured love in trophies. Success was all that mattered. I built everything he wanted, but it cost me. He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Seeing you again, Isabella, it's like finding a piece of myself I thought was gone." Her chest tightened. His honesty was disarming, piercing the walls she'd built. She wanted to lean into it, to confess her plans and beg for forgiveness, but fear held her back. Instead, she touched his arm lightly, her fingers lingering. "You're not gone, Ethan. You're right here." And so am I. The words hung between them, heavy with subtext. Ethan felt the warmth of her touch, the pull of her gaze, but that flicker of doubt persisted. Was she offering connection or playing a role? Isabella senses hesitation, her mind racing. She needed to keep him close, to maintain the con, but his vulnerability was unraveling her resolve. They continued walking, passing a street musician playing a haunting violin melody. Ethan dropped the bill into the open case, his generosity unthinking, natural. Isabella noted it, her instincts cataloging his wealth, but her heart ached at his kindness. "You haven't changed," she said softly, almost to herself. Still the boy who'd give anything to make someone smile. He glanced at her, a half-smile forming. "And you're still the girl who could talk me into anything." His tone was teasing, but his eyes held a question. "Are you still that girl?" As they neared a small fountain, Isabella stopped, her fingers brushing the stone edge. "Ethan, why did you come back?" "Really?" Her voice was quiet, a mix of curiosity and caution, testing his intentions. He took a deep breath, the air cool against his skin. "Because I'm tired of running. From myself, from what matters. You were my first real connection. I had to know if it could still exist." His eyes locked onto hers, raw, unguarded. "Can it?" Isabella's breath caught. The con demanded a smooth answer, a promise to reel him in. But his sincerity made her pause, her heart whispering truths she wasn't ready to face. "Maybe," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "if we're brave enough to try." The moment stretched, charged with unspoken promises and hidden fears. Ethan felt the weight of her words, hope mingling with caution. Isabella felt the pull of authenticity, threatening to derail her plans. Their paths were converging, their lives about collide in ways neither could predict. As they parted, Ethan glanced back, his heart a tangle of hope and doubt. Isabella watched him go, her fingers clutching the scarf at her throat, her mind a battlefield of strategy and emotion. The city buzzed around them, oblivious to the stakes of their reunion. What moments from your past have shaped the person you are today? The city hummed with restless energy as dusk settled, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet. Ethan Hawthorne and Isabella Van stood outside a small, ivy-covered theater in the Arts District, the air thick with anticipation. They had agreed to attend a local play, a nostalgic nod to their childhood days, sneaking into school performances. The theater's marquee flickered, casting a warm glow over Isabella's face, her emerald eyes catching the light like polished gems. Ethan, in a simple jacket, felt his pulse quicken, not just from the evening's chill, but from the weight of the moment. This was it, the central event hinted by their reunion, a spark that could either rekindle their past or expose its fragility. Inside, the theater was intimate, its velvet seats warm but welcoming, the stage lit with soft spotlights. The play, a poignant tale of lost love and second chances, mirrored their own story too closely for comfort. Isabella sat beside Ethan, her posture relaxed but her mind a storm. She had orchestrated this evening, suggesting the play to deepen Ethan's emotional investment, a step in her con to secure his trust and his money for a fictional literary festival. Yet, as the actor spoke of heartbreak and redemption, her carefully laid plans began to fray. Ethan's presence, his quiet intensity, stirred memories she'd buried. Stolen kisses by the creek, promises whispered under starlight. Her fingers tightened around the armrest, betraying the turmoil beneath her composed exterior. Ethan, too, was caught in the moment's gravity. The play's dialogue, lines about love enduring despite betrayal, echoed his hopes and fears. He glanced at Isabella, her profile softened by the stage's glow, and felt a surge of longing. She was here, real, the girl who'd once made his world feel whole. But the flicker of calculation he'd glimpsed in her eyes gnawed at him. Was this evening a genuine reconnection, or another layer of her charm? His hand rested inches from hers, the space between them charged with unspoken questions. As the play reached its climax, a scene where the protagonist confronts his lover's deception. Isabella's breath hitched. The actress's trembling voice, confessing lies born of desperation, fell like a mirror held to her soul. She stole a glance at Ethan, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the stage. Did he see himself in the betrayed lover? Did he sense her own hidden truths? Her heart pounded, the con feeling heavier with each passing second. She wanted to reach for him, to confess everything, but fear of losing him, of exposing her shame, kept her silent. The scene shifted, the stage lights dimming to mimic a starry night, and the actors shared a tentative embrace, choosing forgiveness over pride. Ethan's hand moved, brushing against Isabella's, his touch warm and deliberate. It feels like us," he whispered, his voice low, raw with emotion. Two people finding each other again, despite everything. Isabella's throat tightened. His words pierced her defenses, exposing the girl who'd once loved him without pretense. "Ethan," she began, but her voice faltered, caught between truth and deception. She turned to him, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "Sometimes, the past feels so close, like we could step back into it. But we're not those kids anymore." He nodded slowly, his fingers lingering on hers. "Maybe not, but I want to believe we can be something new, something real." His gaze held hers, searching, pleading. The vulnerability in his eyes was a blade, cutting through her carefully constructed walls. The play ended with a quiet resolution, the lovers choosing to rebuild trust. The audience applauded, but Ethan and Isabella remained still, locked in a moment that felt like a precipice. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, the city's pulse seemed to fade, leaving only the rhythm of their breaths. The street was alive with couples and laughter, but for them, the world narrowed to the space between their hands. Now clasped tightly, they walked toward a nearby cafe, its windows glowing with candlelight. Inside, they found a corner table, the hum of conversation a soft backdrop. Isabella ordered a chamomile tea, her hands trembling slightly as she stirred it. Ethan watched her, noting the subtle tension in her movements, the way her eyes darted away when he looked too long. He wanted to ask about the flicker of unease he'd sensed, but the play's emotional weight still lingered, urging him to trust, to hope. "Do you ever wonder," he said, leaning forward, "what would have happened if we hadn't lost each other? If life hadn't pulled us apart?" Isabella's lips parted, a genuine ache surfacing. "All the time," she admitted, her voice soft, unguarded for a moment. "I used to imagine us running away together, building a life where no one could hurt us." Her eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, the con vanished, replaced by a raw truth she hadn't meant to share. "But life, it makes you hard. You learn to protect yourself." Ethan reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "You don't have to protect yourself from me, Isabella. Not anymore." His voice was steady, but his eyes held a quiet plea. "I left everything behind for this, for a chance at something real. With you." Her chest ached, the sincerity in his words unraveling her. She wanted to confess, to tell him about the festival scam, the lies she'd woven to secure her future. But the warmth of his hand, the trust in his gaze, made her hesitate. Instead, she squeezed his hand, her smile fragile but real. "I want that too," she whispered, the words tasting like both a promise and a betrayal. The cafe's candlelight flickered, casting shadows that danced across their faces. Isabella's mind raced. Her plan required keeping him close, but his vulnerability was making the con feel like a betrayal of herself. Ethan felt the spark of their connection, a flame that could either warm or burn. The play had mirrored their story too closely, its themes of love and deception amplifying their emotions. As they left the cafe, walking under a canopy of twinkling streetlights, Ethan stopped, turning to face her. "Isabella, I feel like we're on the edge of something big, but I need to know you're all in." His voice trembled slightly, betraying the depth of his hope. She swallowed hard, her heart warring with her instincts. "I'm here, Ethan," she said, stepping closer, her breath visible in the cool air. "I'm trying to be." Her words were a half-truth, but the emotion behind them was real, a spark that threatened to ignite something neither could control. They stood inches apart, the city fading into a blur. Ethan's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin, and for a moment time stopped. The spark of their reunion, fanned by the play's emotional resonance, had landed like a bomb, exposing their vulnerabilities and desires. Isabella felt the pull of love, a force stronger than her schemes, while Ethan sensed a truth just out of reach, teetering between trust and doubt. What moment in your life felt like a spark that could change everything? The city woke to a gray dawn, the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt. Ethan Hawthorne stood at the window of his brownstone, coffee mug in hand, staring at the drizzle that blurred the skyline. The emotional spark from last night's theater outing with Isabella Vance still burned in his chest, but doubt crept in like a thief. Her words, her touch, had felt so real, yet there was a shadow in her eyes, a hesitation that kept him from fully surrendering to the hope of their reunion. At 45, he'd learned to trust his instincts, and they whispered caution even as his heart urged him forward. He wanted to believe in the girl who'd once shared his dreams, but the polished charm of the woman she'd become felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. Across town, Isabella sat in the back room of her bookstore, surrounded by stacks of unsold novels and a ledger of half-truths. Her fingers trembled as she sipped tea, the memory of Ethan's hand on hers replaying like a loop. The play had cracked her armor, his vulnerability threatening to unravel the con she'd planned, a fake literary festival to siphon his wealth. She'd spent years perfecting the art of detachment, charming Marks with smiles that never reached her heart. But Ethan was different. His sincerity, his raw need for connection, stirred a longing she'd buried since her parents' death at 16. She wanted to confess, to abandon the scam, but fear of exposure, of losing him, clamped her lips shut. "I can't let him in," she muttered, pacing the cramped room. "Not yet." Ethan's morning was restless. He pulled on a coat and walked to a nearby diner, the kind of place where grease clung to the air and conversations hummed low. Sitting at the counter, he scribbled notes on a napkin. Questions about Isabella, about the life she'd built. Her bookstore was charming but barely profitable. Her stories of survival hinted at a past more complex than she let on. He wanted to trust her, to believe their connection was a peace he'd sought by abandoning his billionaire life. But her guarded glances, her too perfect smiles, echoed the corporate sharks he'd left behind. "Is she playing me?" he whispered, crumpling the napkin. The thought stung, but he couldn't walk away, not when her laugh still echoed in his chest like a melody from their childhood. Isabella, meanwhile, threw herself into her bookstore routine, her movements sharp, deliberate. Customers milled about, their chatter a distraction from the storm in her mind. She rang up sales, her smile automatic, but her thoughts were on Ethan. Last night, his words, "I want something real," had pierced her. She'd planned to deepen the con today, inviting him to a charity reading at the bookstore, a staged event to sell her festival scam. But the idea of manipulating him further felt like swallowing glass. She glanced at a framed photo on the wall, a snapshot of her parents, smiling, unaware of the accident that would orphan her. "You'd be ashamed of me," she whispered, her voice breaking. She wanted to be the girl Ethan remembered, not the con woman she'd become. Ethan arrived at the bookstore just as the drizzle thickened into rain. The bell above the door chimed, and Isabella looked up, her heart lurching. He stood there, raindrops clinging to his jacket, his salt and pepper hair damp, eyes searching hers with a mix of hope and unease. "Hey," he said, his voice soft but weighted. "Thought I'd drop by. Maybe help with that charity reading you mentioned." Isabella's smile was quick, practiced. "You're sweet," she said, gesturing to a stack of flyers for the event. "It's tonight, just a small thing to support local writers." Her words were smooth, but her pulse raced. The reading was a lie, a setup to pitch her fake festival, but Ethan's presence made her waver. She wanted to cancel it, to tell him the truth, But the fear of losing everything, her shop, her independence, kept her tethered to the con. They worked side by side, arranging chairs and stacking books for the evening. Ethan's hands moved with quiet confidence, his occasional glances warm but probing. "This place, it's like you," he said, pause and hold a worn copy of The Great Gatsby. Full of stories, some hidden, some shining. His tone was light, but the subtext was clear. He sensed her secrets. Isabella's laugh was brittle. "You always had a way with words," she deflected, brushing past him to adjust a poster. Her shoulder grazed his, and the contact sent a shiver through her. She wanted to lean into him, to let the con dissolve, but the weight of her past years of survival through deception held her back. "Not everyone's story is as simple as it seems," she added, her voice quieter, eyes avoiding his. Ethan set the book down, stepping closer. "I don't need simple, Isabella. I just need honest." His words were gentle but firm, a challenge wrapped in care. He reached for her hand, his touch grounding, but she pulled back, her fingers curling into a fist. "I'm trying," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's hard to let go of old habits." The admission slipped out, raw and unintended, and she cursed herself for it. Ethan's eyes softened, but a flicker of doubt remained, like a cloud passing over the sun. The charity reading began as the rain tapered off, drawing a small crowd of locals. Isabella stood at the podium, her voice steady as she introduced a poet, her charm effortless. Ethan watched from the back, his heart torn. Her passion for bookstore, her warmth for the crowd, felt genuine, but so did the corporate facades he'd spent years navigating. He clapped along with the audience, but his mind churned. Was this her, or another performance? After the reading, as attendees mingled, Isabella caught Ethan's eye across the room. He was talking to an elderly regular, his smile warm, unguarded. For a moment, she imagined a life without lies, sharing quiet evenings with him, no scams, no secrets. But the festival con loomed, its deadline pressing. She'd already reached out to a contact to forge documents, to make the pitch convincing. The thought of betraying Ethan made her stomach twist, but the fear of poverty, of losing her sanctuary, was stronger. As the crowd thinned, Ethan approached, his expression unreadable. "You were amazing up there," he said, his voice low, "but I keep feeling like there's something you're not saying, something holding you back." Isabella's breath caught. She wanted to confess, to tell him about the festival, the lies, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she forced a smile, her heart aching. "Maybe I'm just scared," she said, her voice trembling. "Scared of this. Us." He studied her, his hand hovering near hers, then dropping. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "But I'm here. I'm not running." His eyes held hers, searching for a truth she wasn't ready to give. They stepped outside, the night air cool and sharp. The city glittered, oblivious to their tension. Isabella felt the weight of her resistance, her refusal to let go of the con, clashing with the pull of Ethan's sincerity. Ethan felt the sting of her withdrawal, his hope tempered by a growing suspicion. Their connection was real, but so were the walls between them. As they parted, Ethan glanced back, his voice soft but heavy. "I want to trust you, Isabella, but I need you to meet me halfway." She nodded, unable to speak, her heart a battlefield of love and fear. What fears keep you from being fully honest with someone you care about? The city shimmered under a late afternoon sun, its light glinting off wet cobblestones after a brief shower. Ethan Hawthorne stood at a crowded farmer's market, the air rich with the scent of fresh bread and ripe apples. He hadn't planned to be here, a last-minute errand for his neighbor, an elderly woman who needed help carrying groceries, had brought him to this bustling square. His broad frame moved easily through crowd, his salt and pepper hair catching the light as he balanced a canvas bag of vegetables. His mind, though, was elsewhere, replaying Isabella's guarded words in the charity reading, her half-confessed fears. The spark of their connection burned bright, but doubt lingered like a shadow. As he reached for a bundle of herbs, a familiar laugh stopped him cold. Isabella, just a few stalls away, haggling with a vendor over a basket of peaches. Isabella Vance, unaware of Ethan's presence, tosser raven hair, her emerald eyes sparkling with practiced charm. The market was her stage today, a place to blend into the crowd, while scouting new marks for her cons. Her scarf fluttered in the breeze, her movements fluid as she slipped a few extra peaches into her bag with a wink at the vendor. She'd mastered the art of blending sincerity with deception, but Ethan's re-entry into her life had shaken her. The fake literary festival she'd planned to pitch him loomed, but so did the ache of their childhood promises. As she turned, her gaze caught Ethan's, and time seemed to pause. Recognition flared, followed by a flicker of panic. She hadn't planned this encounter, and yet here he was, like fate had conspired to force their paths together. Isabella? Ethan's voice cut to the market's hum, warm but tinged with surprise. He stepped closer, the crowd parting around him, his eyes searching hers. "What are you doing here?" She recovered quickly, her smile bright, but her heart racing. "Just grabbing some fruit. Living the simple life." Her tone was playful, but her fingers tightened around the basket, betraying her unease. This wasn't her script. Ethan's presence felt like a cosmic nudge, a proverb echoing in her mind. The heart knows its path, even when the mind resists. She pushed it away, but the coincidence felt too perfect, too meant to be. Ethan chuckled, adjusting his bag. "Same. Helping out a neighbor. Funny how we keep running into each other." His words were light, but his gaze held a question. Is this chance or something more? He remembered a saying his mother used to whisper. Fate brings those who belong together, no matter the distance. The thought made his chest tighten. He wanted to believe this moment was destiny, not manipulation. They fell into step, weaving through the market's colorful chaos. Vendors shouting, children darting past, the clink of coins and rustle of bags. Isabella pointed to a stall selling homemade jams, her voice teasing. "Remember when we tried to make blackberry jam and ended up with a sticky disaster?" Her laugh was genuine, pulling her back to a summer when trust was simple, and Ethan's presence now felt like an echo of that innocence. Ethan grinned, the memory softening his guarded edges. "We were hopeless. You insisted on adding extra sugar, and I trusted you." He paused, his tone shifting. "I always trusted you back then." The words hung between them, heavy with subtext, a gentle probe into her intentions now. Isabella's smile faltered, her mind racing. She wanted to deflect, to keep the con intact, but the coincidence of this meeting felt like a sign. "Trust was easier when we were kids," she said softly, her eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment. "Life complicates things." Her voice carried a hint of truth, a crack in her armor she hadn't meant to reveal. They stopped at a flower stall, vibrant blooms spilling over wooden crates. Ethan picked up a bundle of wildflowers, their delicate petals reminding him of the fields they'd once roamed. "For you," he said, offering them to her, his gesture simple but loaded, a reminder of simpler times. Isabella took the flowers, her fingers brushing his, the contact sending a jolt through her. "You're too kind," she murmured, her throat tight. The gesture was so purely Ethan, the boy who'd once given her a dandelion crown, that it threatened to unravel her. She wanted to confess, to tell him about the festival scam, but the fear of losing this moment, this connection, kept her silent. As they walked, the market's energy seemed to fade, the world narrowing to their shared steps. Ethan spoke of his neighbor, Mrs. Carter, who'd reminded him of the importance of small kindnesses. She said something that stuck with me. He shared, his voice low. "The heart finds its home in unexpected places. I think maybe that's you, Isabella." His eyes held hers, vulnerable but searching, daring her to meet his honesty. Isabella's breath caught. The proverb echoed in her mind, mingling with her own doubts. She wanted to believe in fate, in the purity of this moment, but her con loomed like a dark cloud. "Ethan," she started, then stopped, her voice trembling. What if the heart's wrong sometimes? What if it leads you somewhere dangerous?" He tilted his head, studying her. "Then you face the danger together," he said, his voice steady but soft. "That's what trust is, isn't it? Taking the risk because it's worth it." His words were a challenge, a plea, and they pierced her heart. They reached a quiet corner of the market, where a street musician strummed a gentle guitar melody. Isabella clutched the wildflowers, their scent mingling with the crisp air. She felt the pull of their childhood, the innocence of their bond, clashing with the weight of her deception. "I want to believe that," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "I want to believe we're here for a reason." Ethan stepped closer, his hand hovering near hers. "Maybe we are," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe this, running into you here now, is the universe telling us something." His fingers brushed hers, a tentative bridge between doubt and hope. The moment stretched, charged with the weight of coincidence and unspoken truths. Isabella's heart pounded, her con feeling like a betrayal not just of Ethan but of herself. Ethan felt the spark of fate, but the shadow of her hesitation kept him cautious. Their paths had crossed by chance, yet it felt like destiny, a moment that could either solidify their bond or set the stage for its unraveling. As they parted, Ethan handed her a small paper bag of apples from the market, a playful nod to their childhood thefts. "Don't eat them all at once," he teased, but his eyes held a deeper question. "Can I trust you?" Isabella smiled, her heart aching. "I'll save some for you," she said, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. As he walked away, she clutched the flowers and apples, the proverb ringing in her ears. The heart knows its path. But which path, love or deception, would she choose? What unexpected encounters have felt like fate in your life? The city exhaled a cool evening breeze, the kind that carried the scent of wet pavement and blooming jasmine. Ethan Hawthorne and Isabella Vance found themselves stranded at a small train station on the city's outskirts, their plans derailed by a sudden mechanical failure. They had agreed to a day trip to a nearby vineyard, a nostalgic escape to the countryside where they'd once roamed as children. But now, with the last train canceled and no cabs in sight, they were stuck in a waiting room lit by flickering fluorescent lights, its walls peeling with faded posters. The air was thick with the hum of a distant generator and the weight of their unspoken tensions. Ethan sat on a worn bench, his salt and pepper hair catching the dim glow, his broad shoulders tense. Isabella paced near a cracked window, her raven hair loose, her emerald eyes darting between Ethan and the empty platform outside. This forced proximity, unplanned and inescapable, felt like fate tightening its grip. Ethan glanced at her, his hands clasped tightly, betraying the calm he tried to project. The market encounter had deepened his hope, but her guarded responses kept his doubts alive. Was she the girl he'd loved, or a stranger wearing her face? He wanted to bridge the gap, to believe in a connection that felt so tangible, but her hesitations gnawed at him. "Looks like we're stuck here for a while," he said, his voice steady but laced with curiosity. "Might as well make the most of it." Isabella forced a smile, her fingers twisting the scarf around her neck. The vineyard trip had been her idea, a calculated move to keep Ethan close for a con, the fake literary festival she planned to pitch. But this delay, this enclosed space, stripped away her control. Her heart raced, torn between the scam and the growing pull of Ethan's sincerity. "Yeah," she replied, her tone light but her mind heavy. "Just us and the ghost of this old station." She sat across from him, the bench creaking, her proximity both a comfort and a threat. The waiting room was small, its air stale, forcing them closer than either intended. A vending machine hummed in the corner, its faint buzz filling the silences. Ethan pulled a deck of cards from his bag, a relic from his childhood he'd brought for nostalgia. "Remember when we played Go Fish by the Creek?" he asked, shuffling the deck with a faint smile. "You always cheated." Isabella's laugh was genuine, a burst of warmth that surprised her. I didn't cheat, she protested, leaning forward, her eyes sparkling. I was just creatively strategic. The memory softened her, pulling her back to a time when trust was effortless. She took the cards, her fingers brushing his, the contact sending a shiver through her. For a moment, the con faded, replaced by a flicker of the girl she'd been. They played, the game of fragile bridge over their tensions. Ethan's laughter was deep, unguarded, as he caught her slipping an extra card. Still strategic, I see, he teased, his eyes locking onto hers. The play from this felt like a lifeline, but his gaze held a question. Can I trust you? Isabella felt the weight of it, her heart aching. She wanted to confess, to tell him about the festival scam, but the fear of losing him and her carefully built life kept her silent. As the game slowed, the silence grew heavier. Ethan set the cards down, his voice low. Being here with you, it feels right, like we were meant to find each other again. He leaned closer, his breath visible in the cool air. But I keep wondering, are you holding something back? Isabella's chest tightened, his words slicing through her defenses. She wanted to deflect, to charm her way out, but the confined space, the hum of the station, made pretense impossible. Ethan, she began, her voice trembling. I've spent so long protecting myself. Letting someone in, it's terrifying. The admission was raw, a half-truth that hinted at her con without revealing it. Her eyes met his, glistening with unshed tears. He nodded, his hand hovering near hers, then resting gently on her arm. I get it, he said softly. I've built walls too, but I'm trying to tear them down. For you. His touch was warm, grounding, and it pulled at her heart, threatening to unravel her plans. The station's lights flickered, casting shadows that danced across their faces. Isabella stood, pacing to window, needing distance to steady herself. She stared at the empty tracks, her reflection a ghost in the glass. Sometimes I think fate's playing a cruel game, she murmured, almost to herself. Bringing us together like this, when I'm not sure I deserve it. The words slipped out, heavy with guilt, and she cursed herself for letting them escape. Ethan rose, closing the distance between them. Fate doesn't care about deserving, he said, his voice firm but gentle. It's about what we choose to do with it. He turned her to face him, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. I'm choosing you, Isabella. Right here, right now. Can you choose me? Her breath caught, his sincerity a blade to her heart. The con felt like a betrayal now, not just of him but of the girl she'd once been, the one who'd loved him without calculation. I want to, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm trying. Her eyes searched his, pleading for time, for understanding. They sat again, closer now, their knees brushing. Ethan shared a story from his early days in business, a deal gone wrong, a betrayal that taught him to guard his heart. I learned to trust my gut, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. And my gut's telling me you're worth the risk. But I need you to be honest, Isabella. No games. Her throat tightened, the weight of her deception pressing down. She wanted to tell him everything, the festival, the lies, but fear held her back. Instead, she reached for his hand, her fingers trembling. I'm trying to be someone you can trust, she said, her voice barely audible. Someone worthy of this. The station's clock ticked loudly, marking the passage of their forced confinement. They shared quiet moments, a laugh over a bad card play, a shared memory of sneaking into a neighbor's barn. Each moment chipped away at their walls, their proximity forcing emotions to surface. Isabella felt the pull of love, a force stronger than her schemes, while Ethan sensed a truth just beyond reach, his hope tempered by caution. As the announcement of a delayed train crackled through the speaker, they stood, their hands lingering together. The platform outside was still empty, the night stretching endlessly. Ethan looked at her, his voice soft but resolute. Whatever happens, Isabella, I'm here, but I need you to be here too, all of you. She nodded, her heart pounding. I'm trying, she repeated, the words a promise and a plea. The forced proximity had stripped away pretense, leaving them raw, vulnerable, and closer than ever, yet teetering on the edge of truth and deception. What unexpected situations have forced you to face someone's truth or your own? The city's heartbeat softened as night draped its velvet cloak over the streets, streetlights casting a golden glow on the cobblestones. Ethan Hawthorne and Isabella Van sat on a park bench under a sprawling oak, its leaves whispering in the cool breeze. The train station's forced proximity had left them raw, their emotions teetering on the edge of trust and doubt. They walked here after the delayed train finally arrived, seeking a quiet space to breathe, to talk. The air carried the faint scent of damp earth and blooming night jasmine, a stark contrast to the sterile waiting room. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his salt and pepper hair catching the light. Isabella sat beside him, her raven hair loose, her emerald eyes shadowed with secrets. This moment, bathed in moonlight, was about to unravel their pasts, exposing wounds that would either bind them or break them. Ethan broke the silence, his voice low, deliberate. Last night at the station, it felt like we were close to something real, but I still feel like there's a piece of you I don't know. His eyes searched hers, a mix of hope and caution. The park was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of leaves, amplifying the weight of his words. Isabella's fingers tightened around the edge of the bench, her heart pounding. The con, her fake literary festival, loomed like a guillotine, but Ethan's sincerity was dismantling her defenses. She wanted to confess, to shed the lies, but fear of losing him kept her tethered to silence. "You want to know me?" she asked, her voice soft but edged with vulnerability. "It's not a pretty story, Ethan." Her eyes flicked at ground, avoiding his gaze, as memories she'd buried clawed their way to the surface. He reached for her hand, his touch warm, grounding. "I don't need pretty. I need true." His words were a plea, echoing the boy who once trusted her implicitly, and they cut deeper than she expected. She took a deep breath, the air cool against her lips, and began. "When I was 16, my parents died in a car accident. Just gone." Her voice trembled, the rawness of the memory catching her off guard. "I was shuffled through foster homes, each one colder than the last. I learned early that no one was coming to save me, so I saved myself." She paused, her fingers tracing the bench's grain. "I started small, petty scams, charming people out of a few bucks. It was survival, Ethan. By the time I was 20, I was good at it. Too good." Ethan listened, his chest tightening. The girl he'd known, bold, kind, full of dreams, had been shaped by loss into someone he barely recognized. "You were alone," he said softly, his hand still on hers. "You did what you had to." Her eyes met his, glistening. "It wasn't just survival. I got addicted to the game. The rush of outsmarting someone, of controlling the narrative. It made me feel powerful when the world kept trying to break me." She swallowed hard, the confession spilling out like a dam breaking. "But every win came with a cost. Friends, trust, love. I pushed it all away." Ethan's jaw clenched, a mix of empathy and unease. Her honesty was a gift, but it hinted at deeper secrets. "You're telling me this now," he said, his voice steady but probing. "Why?" "Because," she hesitated, her breath visible in the cool air, "because you make me want to be better. The girl you knew, she's still in here, somewhere, but she's buried under years of choices I can't undo." Her voice broke, and a tear slipped down her cheek, catching the moonlight. Ethan's heart ached, tore between compassion and suspicion. He wanted to pull her close, to promise she could be that girl again. But her words stirred questions. Was this confession the whole truth, or another layer of her game? He shifted, his voice dropping. "I want to believe you, Isabella, but I need to know, are you still playing that game with me?" Her breath caught, his question a blade to her heart. She wanted to tell him about the festival, to lay bare a con, but fear of his rejection, of losing the bookstore, of facing her own shame, choked her. Instead, she squeezed his hand, her eyes pleading. "I'm trying not to," she whispered. "I swear, Ethan, I'm trying." The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken truths. Ethan's mind raced, replaying her childhood, her laughter, her fierce loyalty against this new image of a woman shaped by survival. He stood, pacing a few steps, then stopped, his back to her. "I have my own ghosts," he said, his voice rough. "My father, he never saw me, just what I could achieve. Every deal I closed, every billion I made, was for him, but it was never enough." He turned, his eyes raw. "When I left it all behind, I thought I could escape that emptiness. Then I found you, and it felt like home. But now I'm wondering if I'm chasing a memory." Isabella stood, closing the distance, her heart pounding. "You're not," she said, her voice urgent. "I'm real, Ethan. It's real. But I'm scared. Scared of what you'll think if you know all of me." Her hands trembled, reaching for his. "I was that girl who loved you. I still am, somewhere inside." He looked down at their joined hands, the warmth of her touch clashing with his doubts. "I want to know her," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I need the truth, Isabella. All of it." His eyes locked onto hers, a silent demand for honesty that made her chest ache. They sat again, the bench creaking under their weight. The park's quiet enveloped them, the moonlight casting long shadows. Isabella shared more. Stories of her early cons, the thrill of outwitting marks, the loneliness that followed each victory. Ethan listened, piecing together the woman she'd become, his heart torn between admiration for her resilience and fear of her deception. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a soft, bittersweet sound. "You know, I once tried to impress my father by forging his signature on a deal when I was 17. Thought I could prove I was as ruthless as him." He shook his head, the memory bitter. "He found out, and I've never seen him so proud and so disappointed. That's when I knew I'd never be enough for him." Isabella's eyes widened, a spark of connection igniting. "We both learned to play roles, didn't we?" she said softly. "You to please him, me to survive." Her voice trembled, the shared vulnerability binding them closer. The night deepened, the air growing colder. They sat closer now, their shoulders brushing, the confessions weaving a fragile thread between them. But the shadow of Isabella's con loomed, a truth she hadn't yet revealed. Ethan's openness, his willingness to share his pain, made her deception feel heavier, more unforgivable. As they stood to leave, Ethan pulled her into a gentle embrace, his breath warm against her hair. "We're not those kids anymore," he murmured. "But maybe we can find who we're meant to be together." His words were a hope, a challenge, and a warning. Isabella nodded, her heart racing. "I want that," she whispered, her voice breaking. "More than you know." But as they walked away, the weight of her unspoken truth pressed down, threatening to shatter the trust they'd begun to build. What hidden truths from your past have shaped who you are today? The city shimmered under a late morning sun, its light filtering through the canopy of a quiet botanical garden where Ethan Hawthorne and Isabella Vance wandered. The air was thick with the scent of blooming roses and damp earth, a sanctuary from the urban pulse. After the raw confessions of the previous night, their connection felt fragile yet potent, like a flame that could either warm or consume. Ethan walked with a relaxed stride, his salt and pepper hair catching the sunlight, his broad shoulders less tense than before. Isabella matched his pace, her raven hair tied loosely, her emerald eyes softer but still shadowed by the weight of her unspoken con, the fake literary festival she'd yet to abandon. The park bench revelations had stripped away layers, leaving them vulnerable. And today's outing, a spontaneous visit to this garden, was a chance to nurture the bond budding between them. They strolled along a gravel path lined with vibrant flowers, the crunch of stones underfoot a steady rhythm. Ethan's hand brushed Isabella's as they walked, a tentative gesture that sent a spark through her. The garden, with its winding paths and hidden alcoves, felt like a cocoon, shielding them from the world's noise. "This place reminds me of the field we used to run through," Ethan said, his voice warm, a smile tugging at his lips. "No rules, just freedom." Isabella laughed softly, the sound genuine, uncalculated. "Freedom," she echoed, her eyes scanning the roses. "I forgot what that feels like." Her words carried a quiet ache, a hint of the girl who'd once dreamed without fear. She wanted to lose herself in this moment, to let go of the con, but the fear of exposure, of losing her bookstore, her independence, clung like a shadow. They paused by a small fountain, its gentle gurgle blending with birdsong. Ethan sat on the stone edge, patting the space beside him. "Come here," he said, his tone inviting but soft. "Let's just be for a while." Isabella hesitated, then sat, their knees brushing. The proximity felt intimate, safe, and for the first time in years, she let herself relax, her shoulders loosening. "You know," Ethan began, his voice low, "last night, when you told me about your past, it made me see you, really see you." He turned to her, his eyes steady, unguarded. "You're not just the girl I loved back then. You're stronger, braver, even if you don't see it." Isabella's chest tightened, his words stirring a warmth she hadn't felt in decades. "You make me sound better than I am," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She wanted to confess, to tell him about the festival scam, but his sincerity made her fear the fallout. Instead, she leaned closer, her hand resting on his. "You're not so bad yourself, Ethan. Most people with your kind of money, they don't walk away to find something real." He chuckled, a deep, warm sound that eased attention. "Money's a lousy substitute for this," he said, gesturing to the garden, to her. "I spent years chasing it, thinking it would fill the hole my father left. But it didn't. You're reminding me what matters." His fingers laced through hers, a gentle claim that made her heart race. They shared a quiet moment, the fountain's rhythm a backdrop to their closeness. Isabella felt the con slipping further away, her desire to be honest growing stronger. She told a story from her teenage years, sneaking into a library after hours to read poetry, a rare moment of rebellion that wasn't about survival. "I used to imagine reading those poems to someone who cared," she said, her eyes meeting his. "Someone like you." Ethan's smile was soft, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "I would have listened," he said. "I still would." He shared a memory of his own, a night spent stargazing alone after a fight with his father, wishing for someone to share the silence. "I thought of you then," he admitted, his voice raw, "wondering where you were, what you were dreaming." The vulnerability in his words cracked something in Isabella. She felt the pull of their shared past, the innocence of their childhood love, and it made her want to be the woman he believed in. "Ethan," she started, her voice trembling, "I don't deserve you seeing me like this. Like I'm good." He tilted his head, his eyes searching hers. "You are good, Isabella. You've just been fighting alone for too long." He squeezed her hand, his touch a lifeline. "You don't have to anymore." Tears pricked her eyes, and she blinked them away, a laugh escaping instead. "You're too much," she said, nudging him playfully, "making me feel things I forgot how to feel." The humor lightened the moment, a shared warmth that felt like healing. They stood, continuing their walk, passing a bed of wildflowers that reminded them of their childhood fields. As they reached a secluded arbor draped in vines, Ethan stopped, pulling a small, weathered notebook from his pocket. "Found this in my old things," he said, flipping it open to reveal childish sketches, stars, trees, and a stick-figure girl with a crown of flowers. "You drew this for me, remember? Said I'd be your knight someday." Isabella's breath caught, the memory flooding back. She'd been 12, dreaming of a life where love was enough. "I can't believe you kept it," she whispered, her fingers tracing the faded lines. The gesture broke something in her, the con feeling like a betrayal of that girl's dreams. "Ethan, I want to be that person again. For you." He stepped closer, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. You already are, he said, his voice low, fervent. I see her in you every day. His words were a balm, soothing the wounds of her past, but they also sharpened the guilt of her deception. They sat in the arbor, sharing more stories, lighter ones now, filled with humor. Ethan recounted a disastrous attempt at baking cookies as a kid, flour covering every surface. Isabella laughed, sharing how she'd once tried to borrow a neighbor's cat, only to be chased by an angry tabby. Their laughter echoed through the garden, a melody of connection that felt like a glimpse of peace. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden streaks across the sky, Isabella felt a shift. The con, once her lifeline, now felt like a chain. Ethan's kindness, his belief in her, made her want to shed it, to risk everything for a chance at something real. But fear lingered, fear of losing him, of facing her own shame. Ethan sensed her quiet struggle, his hand finding hers again. "Whatever's holding you back," he said softly. "You don't have to face it alone. I'm here, Isabella, for all of it." His eyes held hers, a promise that made her heart ache with both hope and guilt. They left the garden as dusk settled, their hands intertwined, their bond stronger than ever. But the shadow of Isabella's con loomed, a truth she couldn't hide forever. The peace they'd found in this moment was fragile, teetering on the edge of revelation and heartbreak. What moments of connection have made you feel truly seen? The city pulsed under a leaden sky, the air heavy with the threat of rain. Ethan Hawthorne and Isabella Vance stood in the cramped back room of her bookstore, surrounded by towering stacks of unsold novels and the faint scent of old paper and ink. The warmth of their garden bonding had carried them into this moment, but a storm was brewing, both outside and within. Ethan leaned against a cluttered desk, his salt and pepper hair disheveled, his broad shoulders tense with unease. Isabella stood by a narrow window, her raven hair catching the dim light, her emerald eyes shadowed with dread. A single piece of paper, a forged document outlining her fake literary festival, had fallen from her ledger, landing at Ethan's feet. The revelation of her con, the truth she'd hidden through their growing bond, was about to shatter everything. Ethan picked up the paper, his fingers trembling as he scanned the words. Literary Festival Investment Opportunity. His eyes narrowed, the details, dates, budgets, promises of returns, striking him like a blow. He recognized the polished language, the kind he'd seen in countless boardroom scams. His heart sank, the warmth of their recent moments replaced by a cold, gnawing betrayal. "Isabella," he said, his voice low, sharp, "what is this?" Isabella froze, her breath catching. The document, carelessly left out after a late-night planning session, was her undoing. She'd meant to confess, to abandon the con, but fear had kept her silent. Now, her worst nightmare was unfolding. "Ethan, her voice trembled, her hands clenching at her sides. "Let me explain." "Explain." His voice rose, raw with hurt. He held up the paper, his eyes blazing. "This is a scam, isn't it? A fake festival? Were you planning to take my money, Isabella? Was all of this, us, just part of the game?" His words cut like glass, each one a wound to her heart. She stepped forward, her eyes glistening with tears. "No, Ethan, it's not like that. Not anymore." Her voice broke, desperation seeping through. "Yes, I planned it first. I saw you, your wealth, and I thought I could survive. But then I got to know you again, and everything changed." She reached for him, but he pulled back, the space between them a chasm. "Changed." Ethan's laugh was bitter, his hands raking through his hair. "You lied to me, Isabella. Every laugh, every touch, every moment we shared, was it real or just you playing me?" His voice cracked, the pain of betrayal mingling with the love he still felt. He turned away, staring at the rain-streaked window, his reflection a fractured image of a man who'd risked everything for her. Isabella's chest heaved, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It was real," she whispered, her voice raw. "Everything I felt, everything I said in the garden, at the station, it was real." I didn't expect to care, Ethan. I didn't expect to love you. The confession hung in the air, fragile and heavy, but it wasn't enough to bridge the gap. He spun back, his eyes searching hers, torn between anger and longing. "Love," he said, his voice a mix of disbelief and anguish. "How can I believe that when you've been lying from the start? I left my entire life behind for a chance at something real, and you were going to steal it from me." His fists clenched, his body trembling with the weight of his hurt. Isabella sank onto a chair, her hands covering her face. "I know I don't deserve your trust," she said, her voice muffled. "I've spent my life surviving, building walls, playing games. But you made me want to stop. I wasn't tell you. I swear, I was so scared of losing you." Her words were a plea, but they felt hollow against the evidence in his hand. The room was silent save for the patter of rain against the window, each drop echoing the tension between them. Ethan paced, his mind a whirlwind of memories, their laughter in the garden, her tears under the oak, the warmth of her hand in his. He wanted to believe her, to cling to the love he'd felt, but the betrayal was a wound too fresh. "I thought you were my peace," he said, his voice barely audible. "My home. But now, I don't know if I was ever anything to you." "You were everything," Isabella said, standing, her voice fierce despite her tears. "You still are. I messed up, Ethan. I know that. But I'm here, telling you the truth now, because I can't lose you. Not like this." She stepped closer, her hands outstretched, but he shook his head, stepping back. "I need time," he said, his voice cold, final. I can't look at you right now." He turned toward the door, the forged document crumpling in his fist. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the small room, each one a hammer to Isabella's heart. "Ethan, please," she called, her voice breaking. "Don't walk away." "Not yet." But the door swung shut behind him, the bell above it jingling like a mocking farewell. She sank to the floor, sobs racking her body, the weight of her choices crushing her. For the first time, she questioned whether she was worthy of love, whether the girl Ethan had loved could ever resurface. Outside, Ethan walked into the rain, his coat soaked, his heart a battlefield. The city's lights blurred through the downpour, mirroring his fractured emotions. He wanted to hate her, to erase the warmth of their moments together. But her tearful confession lingered, a whisper of hope amid the pain. Was her love real, or just another lie? He clutched the crumpled paper, its ink smudging in the rain, a symbol of the trust now shattered. Isabella sat alone in the bookstore, the silence deafening. The con, once her shield, had cost her the one person who'd seen her as more than her mistakes. She thought of her parents, their laughter, their belief in her goodness. "I'm sorry," she whispered to them, to Ethan, to herself. The girl who dreamed of love was still there, but she'd buried her under years of survival. Now, exposed and vulnerable, she wondered if she could ever reclaim her. Ethan reached a quiet bridge, the same one where he'd stood weeks ago, searching for peace. The river below churned, reflecting his turmoil. He leaned against a railing, the cold metal grounding him. Isabella's face, her tears, her trembling voice haunted him. He wanted to run back, to forgive, but the sting of betrayal held him fast. "Was any of it real?" he muttered, his voice lost in the rain. The shatter point had arrived, tearing them apart with brutal clarity. Their bond, so carefully built, lay in ruins, leaving them to question their worth, their trust, and the possibility of love. The rain fell harder, as if the city itself wept for their broken connection. What moment of betrayal has tested your ability to trust? The city lay cloaked in a restless twilight, its skyline a jagged silhouette against a bruised purple sky. Ethan Hawthorne stood alone on the same rain-slicked bridge where he'd first questioned his search for peace, the river below churning with restless currents. The crumpled festival document, now a sodden mess in his pocket, weighed heavier than the billions he'd left behind. His salt and pepper hair was damp, clinging to his forehead, his broad shoulders slumped under the weight of betrayal. Isabella's tearful confession, her admission to Khan, her claim of love, echoed in his mind, a cacophony of hurt and hope. The shattered point had torn them apart, but now Ethan faced a choice. Walk away, protecting his heart, or risk everything to believe in her. Across town, Isabella Van sat in her darkened bookstore, the glow of a single desk lamp casting shadows over stacks of unsold novels. Her raven hair hung loose, framing a face pale with exhaustion, her emerald eyes red-rimmed from tears. She felt the weight of her life's choices, years of cons, of survival, now culminating in the loss of the one person who'd seen her as more than her scams. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of the city and the creak of the old building. She clutched the wildflowers Ethan had given her at the market, their petals wilting, a mirror to her fading resolve. "I ruined it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I ruined us." The con, her fake literary festival, had been her shield, but now it was her prison, locking her away from the love she'd begun to crave. Ethan's boots scuffed against the bridge's wet stones, his breath visible in the cool air. His mind replayed every moment with Isabella, the laughter in the garden, the warmth of her hand, her trembling confession in the bookstore. Her words, "I didn't expect to love you," haunted him, a fragile thread of truth in a tapestry of lies. He wanted to hate her, to bury the pain and move on, but his heart refused to let go. "She was real," he muttered, gripping the railing, the cold metal biting his palms. Some of it had to be real. A proverb his mother once shared surfaced. The heart forgives what the mind condemns, if love is true. Could he forgive? Could he trust again? Isabella rose, pacing the bookstore's back room, her fingers tracing the edges of a childhood photo of her and Ethan, unearthed from a dusty box. Their young faces, grinning under an oak tree, mocked her now. She'd been that girl once, bold, hopeful, in love with a boy who'd made her feel safe. But survival had twisted her into someone else, someone who'd nearly destroyed the one person who mattered. "I have to fix this," she said, her voice firm despite her trembling hands. She grabbed a notebook, scribbling a letter, a confession, an apology, a plea. She wrote of her fear, her shame, her love, pouring out the truth she'd been too scared to voice. But would he read it? Would he care? Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from a friend warning about another article on local scams. Isabella's name mentioned in passing. His stomach twisted, but he didn't open it. Instead, he thought of her eyes, glistening with tears, her voice breaking as she swore her love was real. He'd left his empire for peace, for authenticity. Could he abandon that quest now, just because it hurt? He pulled the crumpled document from his pocket, staring at the smudged ink. It was proof of her deceit, but also of her vulnerability. She'd let him see it, let him confront her. That had to mean something. Isabella sealed the letter, her hand shaking as she addressed it to Ethan's brownstone. She stepped outside, the night air sharp against her skin, and dropped in a mailbox before she could change her mind. The act felt final, a surrender to truth, but also a gamble. If he rejected her, she'd lose not just him, but the part of herself she was trying to reclaim. She returned to the bookstore, sinking into a chair, the wildflowers in her lap. "Please, Ethan," she whispered. "See me." Ethan walked back to his brownstone, the city's lights blurring through his thoughts. He stopped at a small cafe, needing warm clarity. Over a steaming coffee, he pulled out a pen and a napkin, jotting down his feelings, anger, love, confusion. "She lied," he wrote, "but she also loved. Can I live with both?" The question burned, forcing him to confront his own fears. He'd spent years hiding behind wealth, afraid of vulnerability. Isabella, for all her deceit, had shown him her scars. That was real, wasn't it? The cafe's radio played a soft melody, a song about second chances that made his chest ache. He thought of his father, whose coldness had taught him to guard his heart, and realized he didn't want to live like that anymore. Isabella's betrayal hurt, but her love, raw, messy, flawed, felt like the peace he'd been chasing. He stood, resolve hardening, and headed home, determined to face her, to demand the full truth, to decide. Isabella, unable to sleep, walked the bridge where she knew Ethan sometimes went. The coincidence felt like fate's last nudge, but he wasn't there. She leaned against the railing, the river's churn mirroring her turmoil. "I love you," she whispered to the empty air, practicing the words she hoped to say. The night felt endless, her heart suspended between hope and despair. Ethan reached his brownstone, finding her letter in the mailbox. His heart pounded as he tore it open, her handwriting shaky but deliberate. "Ethan, I've lied to you, and I hate myself for it. The festival was a con, a way to survive, but you changed everything. I love you, not the boy I knew, but the man you are. I'm sorry. If you can forgive me, I'll spend my life proving I'm more than my mistakes." Isabella, the words hit like a wave, washing away some of the anger, leaving raw hope in its wake. He sank onto his couch, the letter trembling in his hands. Her confession was a mirror to his own fears. Both had hidden, both had hurt, both wanted something real. He thought of the proverb again. The heart forgives what the mind condemns. He could walk away, safe but alone, or he could risk it all for her, for them. His decision crystallized, a leap of faith born from pain and love. Isabella, still on the bridge, felt a presence behind her. She turned, and there was Ethan, his face etched with resolve, the letter in his hand. "You wrote this," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Why?" Her breath caught, tears spilling. "Because it's the truth. Because I love you, and I can't lose you to my own mistakes." Her voice broke, raw, unguarded. Ethan stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking. "I'm angry, Isabella. I'm hurt, but I believe you, and I love you too." His words were a lifeline, pulling her from despair. "We can't erase the past, but we can choose what comes next. Together." She nodded, sobbing, and fell into his arms, the bridge a silent witness to their decision. The city's pulse faded, leaving only their heartbeats, intertwined, fragile, but resolute. What choice have you made to forgive or fight for love? The city glowed softly under a dawn sky, its first light painting the rooftops in hues of pink and gold. Ethan Hawthorne and Isabella Vance sat on the steps of her bookstore, the air crisp with the promise of a new day. The bridge where they reconciled last night felt like a distant memory. Their decision to choose love over betrayal a fragile but firm foundation. Ethan leaned back, his salt and pepper hair catching the sunlight. His broad shoulders relaxed for the first time in weeks. Isabella sat close, her raven hair tucked behind her ears, her emerald eyes clear but still tinged with the weight of her past. The bookstore behind them, once a stage for a con, now stood as a symbol of their shared future, a place to rebuild trust and rewrite their story. Ethan's hand rested on hers, his touch warm, grounding. The crumpled festival document, the catalyst of their shattered point, was gone, burned in a quiet moment of closure before they left the bridge. "So," he said, his voice light but steady, "what happens now?" His eyes met hers, a mix of hope and determination, ready to face whatever came next. Isabella smiled, a real smile, free of calculation. "We start over," she said softly, her voice steady despite the lingering ache of guilt. "No lies, no games. Just us." Her words were a vow, a commitment to the girl she'd been and the woman she wanted to be. The con, her fake literary festival, was dead, replaced by a plan to make the bookstore a genuine community hub, a dream she'd share with Ethan in their childhood. They stood, stepping into the bookstore as the first rays of sunlight spilled through the windows, illuminating shelves of worn books. Isabella gestured to a corner where she'd envisioned a reading nook for local writers. "I want this place to be real," she said, her voice fervent. "A space for stories, for people, not for scams. Will you help me?" Ethan nodded, his smile warm, unguarded. "Always," he said, his hand brushing her arm. "But only if you let me bring those terrible cookies I tried to bake back then." His teasing broke the tension, her laughter echoing through the shop, a sound that felt like home. They spent the morning planning, their voices mingling with the creak of the floorboards. Isabella outlined her vision: open mic nights, book clubs, workshops, her passion infectious. Ethan offered ideas, drawing on his business acumen, but this time without the cold ambition of his past. We could partner with local schools, he suggested, sketching a layout on a napkin. Get kids reading, dreaming like we did. His eyes met hers, a shared memory of tree forts and whispered promises sparking between them. As they worked, Isabella's guilt lingered, a quiet shadow. She paused, her fingers tracing a book's spine. "Ethan," she said, her voice low, "I need you to know I'm still sorry. For the lies, for hurting you. I'll spend every day making it right." Her eyes searched his, vulnerable, seeking absolution. He stepped closer, his hand cupping her cheek. "You're already making it right," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You chose truth. You chose us. That's enough for me." His words were a balm, easing the ache in her heart. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, the warmth of his arms a promise of forgiveness. The day unfolded with small, meaningful steps. They cleaned the bookstore, rearranging shelves, dusting corners, their laughter filling the space. Ethan found a box of old poetry books, pulling out a worn copy of Leaves of Grass. "This was your favorite," he said, handing it to her. "You used to read Whitman under the stars." Isabella took the book, her fingers trembling with memory. "I thought I could find myself in his words," she said, her voice soft. "Maybe I still can." She opened it, reading a line aloud. "I am large, I contain multitudes." She looked at Ethan, her eyes glistening. "Maybe that's us, full of contradictions, but still here." He smiled, his hand finding hers. "Multitudes," he echoed. "I like that." The moment felt sacred, a reclamation of their past and a step toward their future. They sat in the reading nook, sharing more memories, silly ones, painful ones, each story weaving them closer. Ethan spoke of his mother, her quiet strength, her belief in love despite his father's coldness. Isabella shared a story of her parents' laughter, a rare happy memory before their accident. As the sun climbed higher, the bookstore filled with locals, drawn by a sign Isabella had posted. "New beginnings. Join us for a poetry reading tonight." The event wasn't planned, but it felt right, a spontaneous step toward her vision. Ethan helped set up chairs, his presence steady, supportive. The crowd was small but warm, their voices mingling as poets read, their words a tapestry of hope and healing. Isabella stood at the podium, her voice steady as she introduced the event. "This shop has been my refuge," she said, her eyes finding Ethan's in the crowd. "And now, it's a place for second chances. For all of us." Her words were a declaration, a shedding of her old self. Ethan clapped, his smile proud, his heart full. As the reading ended, they stood outside, the evening air cool against their skin. The city hummed, but it felt distant. Their world narrowed to this moment. Ethan took her hand, his voice low. "I left my old life to find peace," he said. "I think I've found it here with you." Isabella's throat tightened, tears of gratitude pricking her eyes. "I never thought I'd find this," she said, her voice breaking. "A chance to be me with you." They embraced, the bookstore's warm glow behind them, a beacon of their new beginning. The resolution wasn't perfect, their past, their scars would always linger, but they'd chosen each other, chosen truth, and in that choice, they'd found redemption. The city, with its endless pulse, seemed to nod in approval, its lights twinkling like stars guiding them home. What second chance have you given or received that changed your life?
Thank you so much for staying around with me, and thank you for watching this story till end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out, click subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. See you next time, my dear family and dear friends.